All right, here we are. I'm loving to see where everybody is coming from today. We see a lot of Chicago and hello, Wisconsin and New York. And if I missed Louisiana, anybody that's here, Canada, we always are happy when our friends are here. Greetings from Georgia. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ready, Set, Smart webinar series, where we're providing that continuous opportunity of highlighting how SMART can provide a fluid workflow that benefits teachers and students. We're going to be showing you how to create lessons and activities focused on classroom instructional strategies. My name is Jody Bean. I'm a Senior Professional Development Specialist. I am in Portland, Oregon, so I'm on the left coast, and I'm happy to see all of you here today. In this week's webinar, using game-based activities to boost learning, we are featuring Blessing Mahola, training specialist from Florida, and Sarah Stork, professional development specialist from Pennsylvania. So some of us, I see that we've been on before, but if you are new, we encourage participation, especially today, because we are really going to boost your engagement. And I know that our presenters would love for you to join them. But if you have any questions, please ask those in the chat. During the presentation, make sure your chat is switched to everyone so that we can pose those questions. We also have a Q&A if you need to do that. Blessing and Sarah, as the presentation goes with all these great examples, you might have some questions coming up. We will filter them to Sarah and Blessing, but we might hold them on till the very end if it works better for the flow. So hopefully that is okay with everyone. We are going to be sharing some resources from today's webinar, and we'll be putting them in the chat. But if by chance you don't get them, it's okay, because you'll get them in a follow-up email. You don't want to miss them because they really do help. And they have some pretty good examples today that you can and use in your classroom today or tomorrow. So we want to help you out with that. We also are going to have a certificate. So if you need a certificate for attending today, there's going to be a survey link at the very end. Go ahead and click on that. It's really quick, just a couple questions. And then at the end, there will be a URL that you're just going to copy and paste, and then you will have your own unique certificate. At this point, I am going to turn the time over to Blessing and Sarah so that we can dive into today's webinar, using game-based activities to boost learning. Blessing and Sarah, it's your turn.
Hello, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Blessing. I am a digital learning specialist at SMART. My contact information will be in the chat. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And thank you, Jody, for sharing that. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Blessing, and hi, everyone. So good to be here with you today. So we're certainly excited to kind of, get off the ground running here. So if you would like to join in on our live examples today, Blessing is going to be sharing some of that information with us as we go. You're welcome to go to hellosmart.com. Jody's going to be popping this information into the chat. So you can certainly watch the Zoom window here. But if you would like to get your hands on some of these activities and view the games that we'll be going through today and some of those lesson examples. Like I said, Jody's popping to the chat right now. If you go to hellosmart.com, you can just join as a guest, and Blessing class ID is 714407. So that's going to be right in there. We'll repeat that again if you didn't quite get a chance to enter in that info, but feel free to go ahead and join that live session. So we're really excited to have you here with us today. And in today's webinar, we're going to explore some instructional and learning benefits of using game-based activities with your students and in your lessons to really find some of those opportunities to boost the learning that's already happening in the classroom. So rather than learning how to build an activity today, our objective is going to be to showcase some finished examples of game-based activities within the context of different lessons in hopes of really igniting our spark and generating ideas for looking at some of these activities through a new lens. So our webinar today is really going to dive deeper into the why and when we might use game-based activities with our students to really deepen that learning and to make our lessons more impactful. So again, rather than, taking us kind of step by step there, we really want to kind of dive a little deeper today into just using some of those real applicable examples of how we might use games with students. We have 4 different lesson examples to use today, and it's going to help us understand how Lumio can really incorporate some game-based activities that can be leveraged for students, at different grade levels, different learning needs, maybe different subject areas. And really what our goal for today is to explore some of the reasoning behind using game-based activities. And we're also really going to take that moment to reflect and share on some of our own experiences. And hopefully you can take away some valuable resources and, some new ideas on how to use game-based learning by the end of our session today. So Blessing, I'm so excited to get going and to get started, and I'm really excited for you to take us into some of our first activities here.
Me too, Sarah. Thank you so much for kind of setting the stage, setting the scene. I'm going to go straight into today's first topic, or first part of the agenda: game-based learning, the reasoning and the benefits. Okay, so as an icebreaker, I'm going to try and find out from you, when do you use game-based activities in your lesson? Okay, we're trying to answer 2 questions in today's session. The main question we want to know is, why do we use them? When are they effective? When are they appropriate? But before we get to that question, we really want to unpack or learn from you, when do you use them in your activity, in your lessons? Is it at the beginning, the middle of a lesson? Is it at the end of the lesson? Or do you kind of sprinkle these activities throughout your lesson? So I'm going to start a shout it out. The activity is started right now. So if you want to just contribute some text, you can just write at the beginning of the lesson. You can write throughout the lesson. I see some responses are coming in the chat as well. So some of us are saying, as a review, we use these throughout the lesson, at the beginning and the end. I'm seeing my responses come in here. Building background knowledge, that's a good one. Formative assessment, indeed. That is a great way to get students to kind of be engaged when you are assessing. Not just formative assessment, I see here piquing interest at the beginning. So maybe you want to do a quick pre-assessment to kind of gauge where your students are at. I love these examples. I often look at a Shout It Out, Sarah, as a game in itself, because the responses are coming in here and I can sort them out into different places. And we can all see what everybody is contributing. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm wondering if we can kind of zoom in on some of the responses as well. It seems like we have some great, information and ideas coming from everyone.
Yes, as you can see at the beginning, at the end, midway for checking in. So that's a great one to check in students and the understanding as a warm-up at the end.
Yeah, warm up, right? To get us interested in a new topic maybe, and to get us kind of going. I even think, especially this time of the year when there's so many different things going on, I love to sprinkle in games with students because it kind of, keeps that attention and keeps things moving.
Definitely. And talking about keeping things moving, I will move on to the next slide. So if you haven't had a chance to respond, let us know in the chat. I will kind of keep this page and I'll actually take a screenshot of it and share it on social, because these responses are absolutely inspiring. So what I'm going to do here is I kind of want to break this down when I'm discussing the game-based activities within Lumio. As you can see, we've got 12 gaming templates here. And I kind of chose this image here that talks about the different levels in Bloom's taxonomy. Now, when I use this as an example, of course, we have different understandings of the student learning models. But I like this image because here you can see on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, we've got a kind of a pyramid here that funnels the path of the student in their learning process. But the thing I really like, Sarah, is that we've actually got the arrows that are going from side to side. And this is more reflective of the responses we got in the Shout It Out. So instead of seeing it as a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, you actually understand that you can use these games at different parts of your lesson for different student needs. You can use one activity to reach out to different kind of learning needs, or to effectively communicate with the students and help them learn, maybe remember, understand, even evaluate and analyze and justify their responses. That's what we're going to get into today. That's really the meat of today's webinar is we'll show you and we will discuss together how can we use one activity to reach out to all these different facets of student learning. So if everybody's ready, I'm ready. Let's get into it and get into some of these examples.
Awesome. Thanks, Blessing.
So the first example we have prepared, Sarah, do you want to take it away and kind of walk us through the first example?
Yeah, this is certainly an example that I would have used with my students when when I'm teaching elementary students, but even in math, I'm going to really incorporate some of that vocabulary work that I know is going to be really important for my students as I'm introducing a new topic. So I'm going to be setting the scene with my students. We're talking about 3D figures, and I really want them to start understanding some of the vocabulary behind this new lesson. So what I'm going to use is this game-based activity. And if you are looking at this screen in Hello Smart and you have your student view popped up, you can press start and you can start engaging in this word search right now. Well, I even see I have a hint coming soon. But what I'm using this activity for is, again, to really set that stage for my students. I want to use this at the beginning of my lesson. I want them interacting with the vocabulary. I want them to be exposed to these specific terms that we're going to be using during our lesson today. And I'm introducing students to the vocabulary, but I'm also gauging their background knowledge as well. So as students are completing this word search activity, what words do they know? Are they asking me questions? Oh, Mrs. Stork, what is the word vertex mean? And then I know that we need to start, diving in and having some more conversation around some of this vocabulary. So as you can see, what we're going to pair with the word search is I'm going to show students this quick video, and it's going to play ad-free for them. It's going to be right inside of our lesson. We're just going to flow from one activity to the next. And then now we're going to be able to apply some of those vocabulary terms. And as Blessing is showing us, we're now looking at a fill in the blanks game. So we've paired that word search with a quick video about 3D shapes. And now we're going to be using this fill in the blanks for students to now really start to apply some of this language. So again, we want students to be moving through, different ways to apply the vocabulary, different ways to understand. We want them to go beyond that memorization, right? And so now we want them to really start utilizing this language that we're going to be using throughout our lesson. So if you have a chance to interact with this fill in the blank activity, you can see, let's see, Blessing, do we have this set up to check the answers as we're completing it?
Great point, Sarah. So what I've done here is I've actually just given everybody an opportunity to practice. I've turned on the answer checking feature. I've turned it off, excuse me. You can turn it on to allow your students to actually get that feedback instantly, or they could wait for a prompt at the end of the activity. So in our case here, I'm just giving everybody the opportunity to experience without the pressure of right and wrong.
So I love that point, Blessing, and how you've set up this activity, because not only, I have different games that I can choose in Lumio, but even I can go deeper with that and I can really customize it to what's going to work for my lesson objectives. So for this lesson, I wanted students to be able to experience this. And then, like you said, you set it up so it's not checking the answers right away. But maybe in another context, it would be helpful to have the answers checked right away or checked at the end. So, I can really take it a little deeper and customize those different options to what's going to fit best for my students and for the objective of the lesson.
Definitely. And I've got some feedback in the chat already saying, this is great for independent practice to really reinforce developed concepts. So that's the kind of feedback that we'll be leaning on everyone in the chat to kind of keep posting in. Let us know where this applies in your particular lesson. How might you use these activities in your particular area of focus? Go ahead and let us know in the chat. Jody will be posting a question in the chat, and we're asking today for the call to action to be for you to share your spark, okay? So if any inspiration comes your way, go ahead and just post it in the chat. Jody, I will ask for those responses in just a few moments after this example, just to see what everybody is saying. So let's move on to the second example. And we're not just going to show you elementary, we're going to show you middle school, secondary, different subjects. We're really going to give you a whole vast array of examples that you can hopefully take away and apply to your own classroom. This is an English example. Looking at my secondary students, we are going through Romeo and Juliet. I've personally had students who've told me how intimidating Shakespeare can be. So let's look at ways in which we can make Shakespeare more relatable, engaging for our students. What might I do at the beginning of the lesson to get my students interested is I can actually use this as a pre-reading discussion. What I'm talking about here is my flip out activity. I've heard a lot of teachers explain flip outs as, oh, flashcards. You can have a word and you can have a picture, a definition at the back. And I always challenge them and say, the world is your oyster, basically. It could be what you want it to be. It could be a choice board. Thank you, Michelle, taking the words right out of my mouth in the chat. She loves using it as a choice board. So what I'm doing here is my students are pretty familiar with the words marriage, tragedy, feud, the concept of love. They have somewhat of an understanding, but I want to enrich this activity. It's not just an icebreaker. I'm actually getting them to then turn the card over. They can choose the subject they want to talk about. And I'm going to create that pre-discussion, that pre-reading discussion. Do you believe in love at first sight? I'll have my students talk about it. And in this case, I'm not just introducing them to a new concept, but I'm getting them to kind of justify using any previous knowledge that they may have learned on any of these topics. So approval, they can flip it right over and the discussion is going, and my students, without even touching the book Shakespeare, have already gained interest in the topic. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. I've got this reading. I've tried reading this a bunch of times and I understand when students are a bit intimidated. So what I've done is I've actually added some audio for you to press play and listen to some audio guide as we get into the prologue. The purpose of today's lesson is to introduce my students to Shakespeare. I want to introduce them to some of the themes and concepts. And then most importantly, I want to introduce them to just the characters. We're not diving deep into the act. We just want to get an understanding and set the scene. So once my students have kind of gone through the reading, I'll play a quick video that explains the characters and their specific role in the play. Please excuse me if I kind of cut you off and go straight to the next slide, but I'll go to the next slide. And this is a game I've prepared. It's a memory match. And we had a conversation about this earlier and how basically I'm going to put it on one player here. And the objective of this game is to match the character and the role. The video told us about the different role everyone plays in the play. We've had some insightful information looking at the prologue. We've also kind of got some ideas from our flip out activity. Some might look at this and say, oh, Blessing, this is a secondary level class. Why are you putting these cute lions and monkeys in memory match? Well, isn't this a fun way, Sarah, and a great way to keep the familiarity of the game that we all grew up playing, but we're just customizing and editing the content because you can customize the content to suit your learning needs or your students. So on one side is the role of the character. On the other side might be the character's name. So I'm actually getting them in a very comfortable, non-intimidating environment to consolidate that information, to remember, okay, Juliet's mother, who is Juliet's mother? It's not Romeo. And they can go on back and forth while they keep matching. Jody,
so we have some great comments coming into the chat that I think would be awesome to highlight right now.
Yes.
Someone mentioned that, you know, if you're using Socratic seminars, maybe using flip out cards for some of those discussion questions. And then also we had a great tip of adding maybe a collaborative workspace to go along with your flip out cards as well for students to collaborate in together. I'm also thinking, you know, that made me think of maybe I would pair that with a shout it out activity that we saw right at the beginning, you know, and have students reflect and give their answers or even ask questions using one of those activities. So awesome. I love all of these amazing suggestions coming into the chat, and, you know, keep it coming.
One thing I'd like to add is there was a question about, are these pre-made activities? So the ones that you're seeing with Blessing and Sarah, They created them, and all of these activities can be created on your own if you have time and you want to do that. But we also have some in the Explorer resource, which I'm sure Blessing and Sarah will probably elaborate a little bit more. You don't have to start from scratch. So if you're all like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, you don't. You can go into our existing Explorer resources, see what you can get, and then edit them, modify them any way you want.
That's a great point, Jody. Thank you for answering that question. These are fully customizable. And you know, what I like about this particular format, or what's happening in our webinar right now in our session, is that we actually are not the experts. I love everybody's contributions, and I love how we're bouncing off each other's ideas. It's very interactive, and let's keep that going. Keep your responses coming in the chat. This is actually phenomenal. I'm going to go on to the next slide. And just to touch on the previous example, the match up, I'll just go back quickly, is that you can see how we're able to get our students to kind of recall, to show and demonstrate their understanding, to introduce them to basic concepts, to get them to justify their responses, all in the space of just 2 activities. So that's really the depth we're trying to go to, is understanding that the activities can be leveraged in so many different ways. Okay, I've got a third example. The third example is a science and health example. And this is for my secondary students. I'm just gonna set the scene by giving some context, okay? The previous lesson was a science lesson where we learned how to differentiate between acids and bases. We learned about the properties of either. We learned about some examples that could be acids or could be base, and my students were basically using this Venn diagram to distinguish between the two. In the new lesson, or in today's lesson, we're on a health unit where we are kind of going through the food pyramid. So we're talking about healthy living. A lot of us often look at game-based activities and relate them only to that specific lesson. But the example that I've tried to showcase here today is that we can actually tie 2 units together using an activity like a super sort, where I can get my students to demonstrate their understanding and call on knowledge from a previous lesson and start connecting those dots and correlating them to the lesson that we have in front of us today. So the way I've chosen to do that is I've created a super sort. I've created these titles, alkaline and acidic foods, because we have just learned about foods. I want them now to start really thinking about which foods could be healthy, for example, alkaline, which foods could exhibit the properties which are more acidic. I'm kind of getting my students to then start thinking about this. Maybe onions, no, onions are actually quite healthy, alkaline foods. I remember that citrus can be quite acidic, so oranges might fall under the, so my students can keep connecting the 2 units. What an enriching activity.
So I'm thinking about a way that we could level up this activity too, right? So we want to be thinking about students maybe evaluating the information a bit more. But you know, for those categories, instead of putting the 2 categories on the spaceships, I'm thinking maybe we could use question marks or leave them non-lip. There you go. Blessing's got the example right there. So when you go in and customize, we could maybe not put those 2 categories there. So students have to decide, you know, why are these objects being sorted. And then also we can use images in this activity too. So if you have any younger students or students who would benefit from having images in the activity, we could certainly use those as well.
Definitely. So Sarah, you're calling on the students to actually apply their knowledge, to dive deeper and kind of analyze the words in front of them and really use more critical thinking skills to kind of reach that conclusion. I absolutely love it. I'm enjoying it. Let's go on to the next one. I'm kind of so excited to see what's coming up next. We're getting some great feedback in the chats as well.
Awesome. So this is going to be more of a history example for our secondary students. Maybe that I know there was a question in the chat about, you know, using some of these games with some of our middle school students. So this example here, we're going to be able to use rank order. And in the rank order activity, what we're asking students to do is rank some explorers from most impactful to least impactful. And I think, you know, coming out of this discussion, this activity is set to not check the answer. So students each get their own copy of this activity. They can rank the different explorers. And, you know, I'm thinking definitely, Blessing, some conversation that's going to come out of here, maybe some of those positive impacts and maybe negative impacts too, right? So really giving students that opportunity to, you know, dive deeper into this subject, to kind of go from remembering and understanding, instead of using this as, say, a timeline activity of who was first to last. I'm kind of flipping it a little bit, and now I want students to more analyze and evaluate the content, and dive a little deeper into it. So, and then what we would do is we would pair this game with another activity for then students to simply recall information, remember, you know, what each of the, you know, explorers accomplished. So you can see this activity, maybe I'm on, you know, targeting some of the remembering and, you know, aspects of, you know, kind of the skills there of what I want my students to do. But now I've paired it with that game to really get that discussion flowing, you know, and leveling this up for my students.
And you can also delete these, Sarah. You can actually delete the definitions and get the students to create their own definitions. So you're going all the way to the top there and getting them to create, you know, and kind of they can even come up with their own influential figures.
Wow,
I've got a good question in the chat here. I have to just bring that to our attention. On the actual rank order, the question is, can you see the students' progress as the teacher? That's a great question. And the way I like to look at it is, an activity like a rank order is one of the activities where students are able to participate on their own devices. So if you're familiar with a monster quiz, the monster quiz will give you results. The teacher can see the pie chart of how the students performed. So that we look at as more of like, it has an assessment quality to it. The rank order, you're actually calling on the students to let you know what their responses are, by then giving them that opportunity to discuss and debate and justify their responses. So as the teacher, I've checked, I've left the responses, the check responses option unchecked, so they don't have to actually check their responses. So what I'm relying on here is I'm relying on the students to let me know that I think this is the most impactful leader, Hernan, okay? So I wouldn't necessarily need to be checking, because they'll let me know, and I'm creating that environment of discussion. I'm creating that openness and that learning together. This is the kind of community we're building in our class for our students to really dive deeper and express themselves. And then another thing I'd like to mention, if you wanted the students to be on the same page, Sarah, what a great way to incorporate our gaming elements. If you look on the teacher screen, so if you are looking at your screen right now in Lumio, you might not see a star on the left-hand toolbar, but if you look on the Zoom screen really quickly, you will see that on my toolbar, I've got a star and a reset button. And what the star does is it opens up options for game elements, okay? So I've got some questions here that I think might be well addressed by these game elements. If I'd like my students to be on the same page in terms of when to complete the activity, I can simply put on a timer. When I put this timer on, I can actually set it so that I've got this little gear icon, set it to 1 minute. Maybe I want the activities to end, after 1 minute, and it's kind of going to let me know that the activity is over. Or maybe I could just give my students 1 minute to discuss and debate their point. So that's one thing you could do. If I click on that star again, I've got buzzers that kind of decide who goes when, who goes next. I could have a randomizer here and assign my students different numbers. I've seen teachers who kind of have students in the roll call sheets that have set numbers. And I can call on student number 5, for example, randomly to give us their take on what is the most influential. A great thing as well about the randomizer is it never selects the same student twice. So you can actually go through your entire list and give students their opportunity to then give their response. Jody, I'm going to call on you to see if I have any more comments, questions, or feedback in the chat.
Oh boy, I am crazy busy here. So if I have not answered your question or your comment, we might have to hold them off to the very end. I don't know, Blessing and Sarah, as you go through at the end when we're doing our Q&A, there's a few people who would love to see how you create the games directly into Lumio. If you have time for that, I think that would be really beneficial for some of the people that are attending today. And then maybe you even can show how you can add the game elements. One of the questions that I absolutely love, and it came from Ellen, she was asking, can this be a whole group or a small group activity on the smart board, or do I have to enroll students on their own devices? I already answered it in the chat, but if you didn't see it, you guys, you have so many options. If you have a smart board and it's touch, right, you can go up there, you can pull it up and have your students play in small group rotation activities. You can have a whole bunch of, different pages in your Lumio file, pull it up on the board. Students can pick whatever game they're doing. So you give that voice and choice to your students, or you can send it out to student devices. And you can maybe have one device under circumstances according to your protocols, but let's pretend things are quote unquote normal. You could have one device and have students playing those games on the device. Or you can send it individually. But don't forget, there's also the opportunity to send activities right before a test home to your students. All you have to do is give a link. There is so many possibilities. It doesn't just end in your classroom. So start thinking, how can I use this and what are my options? Do you have anything to add, Sarah or Blessing?
Thank you, Jody.
I think that's great. Thanks, Jody.
Yes, and we're doing quite great for time, actually. So what I'm going to do is we will share some resources with you in just a moment, but I'm going to give that quick insight into how to build a game. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to end this lesson or edit this lesson. So you'll notice here, I went to this hamburger menu while I'm delivering my lesson, this kind of 3-line menu. Jody was talking about sharing your lesson to students or teachers. So if I select share, I can go ahead and actually share a copy with other teachers or students. But what we're going to look at quickly is I'm going to select edit just to show you how I built all these games. Okay. What I'm going to show you applies to a lot of the other games. I'm going to choose a rank order because I'll show you how to add images and how to add text. And once you understand this basic concept, you can apply it to a lot of the other games. So here, my game, I'm just going to go to the top and select edit activity. Actually, let me show you from scratch so that our newcomers are not left behind at all. If I go to my creation dashboard, so the blue plus button on the bottom left allows me to open up my dashboard, and this is where I see my game-based templates.
And
okay.
Blessing, I'm just going to interject real quick because I see a great question in the chat asking, can you bring in some existing lessons? And if you can see in that top left corner, we can import something like Google Slides or an existing Smart Notebook lesson or a PDF, PowerPoint, and you can just bring that right on into Lumio and then add your games from there. So if you have those existing lessons, your games can just really help, emphasize what you already have.
Definitely. That's a great point, Sarah, because we do want to kind of save time. We are boosting after all. We've got content that we're working with, and we want to kind of, pump up the volume. So I'm going to go ahead here and select game-based activity in my dashboard. And then I could just go ahead and select rank order. If I want to double check what that looks like, I could press the graduation cap, and that's going to give me a short preview of the game. And I can go ahead and select that activity, and it's ready for me to add my content. I could add the text. I can choose if I'd like my answers to be checked instantly or not checked at all, or maybe wait for a prompt. I can even edit the titles here, okay? So I am just gonna press X and show you a finished example. So I'm gonna select edit, and this is what it looks like when I edit. I just added my figures to rank. I chose don't check.
Hey, Blessing, while you're on the slide right here, there was a question about enlarging the text in the rank order. Unfortunately, you cannot enlarge the text, but you can enlarge the images. So my hack, and I put it in the chat, for those of you who are asking, my hack, if you want to enlarge the text, is to screen capture your text. So like Leif Erikson or Christopher Columbus, I would type those out, snip it, and then they would become an image. And then they would be enlarged. So that kind of is your hack around that, but you can add images.
Okay, thank you so much, Jody. So what I'm going to do here is click on the image thumbnail, and I can upload an image that I already have, just like Jody was mentioning, or I can go ahead and add images from the Bing Safe Search, okay? I'm not gonna demonstrate how to do it just for the purposes of today's webinar and time, but I will go on and select next, and then you can choose from a set of templates, or you could choose custom to create your own. I'll select next, and basically you are able to then add your own background image. You can customize the look and feel of your template, and that's it. If I wanted to add instructional audio, on the top right-hand corner, I see this audio icon. I'll select that audio icon, and I can start recording up to 5 minutes of instructional audio on any page. So it's as simple as that. We will be sharing resources, of course, that get a bit more in depth on the how-to. It's just wasn't the purpose of today, but I did want to show you just so everybody leaves feeling catered to, okay? I'm gonna go to the next slide as we get ready to wrap it up. We have a challenge for you. In today's challenge, I'd like for you to kind of go ahead and try one game-based activity, okay? Add it to your lesson to boost some learning or activity that you currently have. Then go ahead and add a gaming element, okay? You saw that star on the left-hand side. See if you can add a randomizer or a buzzer and see how you can incorporate it into your lesson. And then we would like for you to actually share that with a colleague. So keep sharing that spark and sharing with your colleagues, just like you've been doing in today's session. So I will be kind of in the interwebs, looking around, seeing who is kind of sharing some of those lessons. So please do use that hashtag #GoLumio to kind of share with us. So Sarah, do you want to talk us through some of the resources that we have prepared?
Sure. So I know there was a lot, there were some questions in the chat about maybe some ready-made games or things that you can use with your students. So we have some great Lumio resources. We have some toolkits. So if when you click on the Lumio resources there on the resource slide, there's a whole game-based learning toolkit that's going to give you multiple examples, different grade levels, content areas, different purposes and objectives. So that game-based learning toolkit, you can just grab those lesson examples and then use those right with your students. If you want to get a little bit more into the how-to, we do have upcoming webinars, which we have a launch into learning with Lumio webinar coming up next week. So if you want to come join us, we'll get more into kind of the basics and some of those how-to elements. So I would encourage you to join us next week, as well as we have training and instructional resources, and then getting started with Lumio resources that are also linked on this page as well. So and then also, if you are using some other tools with your students, we have some integration guides as well for you linked on here as well. And Jody's going to be popping some of these links into the chat for you to look at. And like I said, join us next week, or even if you just sign up for the webinar next week, we'll be getting into some of the basics. So if this was kind of a lot of information today, and we went over quite a few examples, so I would encourage you to come join us next week to kind of get started with Lumio.
Thank you. Jody, please elaborate a bit more. Oh, Jody has actually just put the survey link in the chat, and your PD certificate is generated after the completion of the survey. So please make sure to click on the link for the survey and complete your PD certificate. Closing remarks here. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my co-hosts, Sarah and Jody. Today's webinar was really enriching in terms of providing some ideas, some sparks, some real applicable examples of us using game-based activities in our class. If you are new to Lumio, please don't be intimidated. We have an entire website, we have an entire webinar dedicated to show you how to actually build the games. So if you go over to the Lumio by Smart YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe for that kind of content to really help you get started and catch up to some of the ideas we're talking about today. That is it. I believe we've answered quite a few of the questions in the chat. You have our emails. If at any point you'd like to email us, feel free to email and we can continue the discussion. So thank you so much to everyone, and have a wonderful morning, day, evening, wherever in the world you are. Thank you.